In 2008, Toyota overtook General Motors to become the largest car manufacturer on the planet, ending a reign General Motors had held for 77 straight years. The Camry was the best-selling sedan in America. Consumer Reports ranked Toyota among the safest and most dependable brands you could buy. But behind those showroom floors, something was going wrong. And when it surfaced, it would trigger the largest automotive recall in history and force millions of drivers to ask a question nobody had ever seriously considered. Could a Toyota actually kill you? The warning signs inside Toyota's complaint database had been there for years. As far back as February 2004, State Farm Insurance quietly flagged an unusual pattern to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Claims involving unintended acceleration in Toyota and Lexus vehicles were climbing at a rate that outpaced normal expectations. By that December, Toyota vehicles accounted for 20% of all unintended acceleration complaints filed with the government, despite holding only about 12% of the market. That's a gap that should have raised eyebrows inside the offices of NHTSA. NHTSA opened an investigation into electronic throttle malfunctions in certain Lexus and Camry models. By July of that year, NHTSA closed the investigation. No defects were found. Over the next several years, scattered complaints continued to trickle into federal databases. Drivers described the same terrifying experience. They would press the gas pedal, the car would accelerate, and it would not stop, even when they moved their foot to the brake. Toyota reviewed the complaints and concluded that no defect existed. The company pointed to driver error, noting that many incidents could be explained by people accidentally pressing the wrong pedal. It was not an unreasonable position. Pedal misapplication is a documented phenomenon across every automaker, but it also became a convenient explanation that allowed Toyota to avoid digging deeper. In 2007, Toyota issued a limited recall to address floor mat interference in certain Lexus ES350 and Camry models. The fix was simple. Dealers would secure the mats so they could not slide forward under the accelerator pedal. It seemed routine, the kind of minor adjustment that happens across the industry every year without making headlines. Nobody outside the regulatory world paid much attention. But then came the crash that changed everything. On August 28, 2009, a family was driving a 2009 Lexus ES350 near San Diego, California. The driver was Mark Saylor, a 45-year-old California Highway Patrol officer with decades of experience behind the wheel. His wife Cleofe sat beside him. In the back seat were their 13-year-old daughter Mahala and Cleofe's brother Chris Lestrella. The car was a loaner from Bob Baker Lexus, where Saylor's own vehicle was in for routine service. Something went wrong on the highway. The Lexus began accelerating, and Saylor could not stop it. Someone in the car called 911. The dispatcher heard the voice say they were in a runaway Lexus, that the accelerator was stuck, and they were approaching an intersection at terrifying speed. The final words on that recording were chilling. Hold on and pray. Pray. Witnesses on the road reported seeing the Lexus weaving through traffic at over 120 miles per hour. When the freeway ended at Mission Gorge Road, the car struck an SUV, broke through a fence, launched off an embankment, rolled through the air for more than 100 feet, and burst into flames. All 4 people inside the Lexus were killed. Investigators later found that the loaner car had been fitted with an incompatible all-weather floor mat that was not designed for that model. The mat had slid forward and wedged the accelerator pedal to the floor. But the crash raised deeper questions. How had an experienced highway patrol officer, someone trained to handle high-speed emergencies, been unable to stop the car? Was the floor mat the only problem? That 911 call, once released to the public, did something no safety report or regulatory filing ever could. It made the danger real. People heard the fear in that voice, and suddenly, Toyota's decades of goodwill began to unravel. Within weeks, the dominoes started falling. In November 2009, Toyota announced a recall of 3.8 million vehicles to address floor mat entrapment across multiple models. But the company was already learning that the floor mat explanation was not going to cover everything. Reports continued to surface from drivers whose vehicles had no floor mat issue at all. Yet the acceleration problem persisted. In January 2010, Toyota issued a second, separate recall covering 2.3 million vehicles for a different problem entirely. Certain accelerator pedals, manufactured by a supplier called CTS Corporation, could develop a mechanical sticking condition. The pedal would get stuck in a partially depressed position due to wear and moisture buildup inside the mechanism. This was not a floor mat sliding out of place. This was a component that could physically jam. And here is what made the situation even worse for Toyota. When the company had responded to the Sailor crash months earlier, it had publicly assured customers that the floor mat recall addressed the problem. Toyota even published a statement on its website declaring it had absolutely not minimized public awareness of any defect, and called suggestions to the contrary irresponsible. But now, with the sticky pedal recall, the company was admitting there had been a second, separate cause of unintended acceleration all along. The question on everyone's mind was obvious. What else did they know that they had not shared? The timing could not have been worse. Toyota took the dramatic step of halting production and sales of 8 of its most popular models while repairs were organized. Those 8 models represented roughly 60% of the company's sales volume in the United States. Dealerships that had been packed with buyers only months before now had rows of unsellable inventory sitting under tarps. In a single month, Toyota's share of the American car market dropped from 18.4% to 13.5%. Sales fell 16% compared to the same month the previous year. The Camry, which had been America's #1 selling car for 3 consecutive years, fell to 5th place almost overnight. Competitors like Nissan, Subaru, and Hyundai saw their own numbers surge as buyers looked elsewhere. And the scrutiny was just beginning. How would the grandson of Toyota's founder face the American public? On February 24, 2010, Akio Toyoda walked into a hearing room on Capitol Hill. He was 53 years old, the grandson of the man who founded the company that bore his family name. He had taken over as president just 8 months earlier, inheriting a crisis that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Seated next to him was Yoshimi Inaba, president of Toyota Motor North America, with a translator nearby. Toyota told the committee he took full responsibility. He said the company had grown too fast and that priorities had become confused. He said they had pursued growth over the speed at which they were able to develop their people and their organization. He expressed regret that this had resulted in the safety issues described in the recalls they faced, and he said he was deeply sorry for any accidents that Toyota drivers had experienced. The lawmakers were not satisfied. Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood testified that Toyota had dragged its feet and been safety deaf until he personally called Toyota to demand faster action. Representative Marcy Kaptur questioned whether the apology reflected sufficient remorse. Representative John Mika held up an internal Toyota document that appeared to boast about diffusing an earlier safety investigation, calling it absolutely appalling. By the end of the day, Toyota was visibly emotional, tearing up as he thanked the room and pledged to rethink everything about the company's operations. How did things get so bad for a company that practically invented modern quality control? In the months that followed, Congress commissioned something unusual. They asked NASA, the agency that put spacecraft into orbit, to examine Toyota's electronic throttle control system. The question everyone wanted answered was whether the problem went deeper than floor mats and sticky pedals. Could the car's own software be telling the engine to accelerate without any input from the driver? NASA engineers at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland spent 10 months on the investigation. Hardware specialists rigorously tested mechanical throttle components at a dedicated facility in Michigan. Software engineers analyzed over 280,000 lines of code from Toyota's engine control module. They even bombarded test vehicles with electromagnetic radiation in a controlled laboratory setting to check whether radio signals, cell towers, or other interference could trigger a malfunction. Transportation Secretary LaHood summarized the findings plainly. He said they enlisted the best and brightest engineers to study Toyota's electronic systems, and the verdict is in. There is no electronic-based cause for unintended high-speed acceleration in Toyotas. The mechanical defects already identified by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the floor mats and the sticky pedals, remain the only confirmed causes. For many people, that closed the case, but not for everyone. What NASA could not do, according to critics, was complete a full review of Toyota's proprietary source code. The investigation had been thorough within its scope, but the agency acknowledged limitations. And in October 2013, a courtroom in Oklahoma revealed what a deeper look into that code actually found. The case was called Bookout versus Toyota. In September 2007, Jean Bookout had been driving her 2005 Toyota Camry off an exit ramp on Interstate 69 in Oklahoma when the car accelerated beyond her control. She pulled the parking brake, leaving long skid marks scoring the pavement, but could not stop. The Camry shot across the road at the bottom of the ramp and slammed into an embankment. Her friend and passenger, Barbara Schwartz, was killed. Bookout spent 2 months recovering from head and back injuries. Toyota might have assumed this case would go the way of so many others, settled quietly or blamed on a confused elderly driver. But what their legal team did not count on was what an independent software expert would find buried inside the car's own code. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. We cover deep dives into automotive history and car culture every week. Now, back to the trial. The key witness was Michael Barr, an embedded software specialist who had spent more than 20 months reviewing Toyota's source code. His working conditions tell you how seriously Toyota guarded this information. He and his team operated from cubicles in a hotel-sized room, supervised by security guards who ensured no one brought paper in or out and that workers wore no belts or watches. Barr produced an 800-page report on what he found. His testimony was damaging. Barr described Toyota's engine control software as spaghetti code, a programmer's term for source code so tangled and poorly structured that it becomes almost impossible to test or maintain reliably. He identified 11,000 global variables in the system, a staggering number for safety-critical automotive software. To put that in perspective, those are 11,000 pieces of data that any part of the program can read or change at any time, creating countless opportunities for one function to accidentally interfere with another. But it got worse. Barr found that Toyota's own safety watchdog software, the program designed to detect when critical tasks inside the processor stopped running, was fundamentally broken. It is incapable of ever detecting the death of a major task, Barr told the jury. That is its whole job. It does not do it. He identified a specific task within the system, referred to at trial only as Task X, to protect Toyota's trade secrets. This single task controlled throttle position, cruise control, and many of the car's fail-safe systems. If Task X died, the throttle could open on its own, and none of the backup systems would catch it. Toyota had claimed its software stack used only 41% of available memory. Barr's analysis showed it was closer to 94%, leaving almost no margin for error. He found 80,000 violations of widely adopted coding standards. He described Toyota's safety architecture as a house of cards, and he concluded that a software malfunction was more likely than not the cause of Jean Bookout's crash. The jury agreed. They found Toyota had acted with reckless disregard and awarded $3 million in compensatory damages. Before the trial could move to the punitive damages phase, Toyota settled for an undisclosed amount. Jurors later told the court they had been prepared to punish the company further. But for Toyota, the courtroom loss in Oklahoma was only the beginning of the financial reckoning. The fallout continued through 2014 when Toyota agreed to pay $1.2 billion in a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice. It was the largest criminal penalty ever imposed on an automaker at that time. The FBI assistant director did not mince words. He said that Toyota put sales over safety and profit over principle, accusing the company of continuing to manufacture vehicles with parts it already knew were dangerous. By 2019, Toyota had quietly settled 537 separate claims from families of people killed or seriously injured in acceleration-related crashes. No public admission of liability accompanied any of those settlements. So where does that leave things? Here's what makes this story so difficult to wrap up neatly. Toyota recovered, and it didn't take long. By 2012, just 2 years after Akio Toyota's tearful appearance before Congress, the company had regained its position as the world's top-selling automaker. It implemented brake override systems across its entire lineup so that pressing the brake would always cut engine power, regardless of what the throttle was doing. It created a global quality task force and restructured how safety complaints flowed from regional offices to headquarters in Japan. It launched programs like Toyota Care, offering complimentary maintenance and roadside assistance to rebuild the trust it had lost. Consumer surveys eventually returned Toyota to the top of reliability rankings. The Camry reclaimed its place as America's best-selling sedan. The brand that nearly collapsed under the weight of its own growth found a way forward. Not by pretending nothing happened, but by changing how it operated from the inside out. But does a recovery erase what came before? The families of Mark Saylor, Barbara Schwartz, and hundreds of others can't answer that question. What they can tell you is that the company they trusted with their lives didn't listen when the warnings were there. Whether Toyota's software was truly responsible for every reported incident, or whether many of those cases involved drivers who tragically pressed the wrong pedal, is something that may never be fully settled. The NASA study pointed one direction. The bookout jury pointed another. Over 500 families reached quiet settlement somewhere in between. And the question of what Toyota knew and when they knew it still hangs in the air every time the company's name comes up in a conversation about automotive safety. What isn't in dispute is what the crisis revealed about the cost of growing faster than your systems can handle, and what happens when the company synonymous with reliability stops listening to the people driving its cars. If this story caught your attention, there is another automotive scandal that followed a similar pattern of denial and delayed accountability. That video is on screen now.